As you're aware, Iran conducted a significant
stating that a U.S. fighter jet shoots down unmanned Iranian drone that was approaching USS Abraham Lincoln in Arabian Sea.
I'm in Erbil, Iraq, as this conflict with Iran expands across this region.
Attack against Israel today, launching approximately 200.
March 12th, 2026, 0347 hours local time, Strait of Hormuz. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group maintains station 42 nautical miles northeast of the Strait of Hormuz. 8 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers form a defensive perimeter. E-2D Advanced Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft circle overhead. Aegis radar systems scan a 360-degree sphere. Everything appears routine. Then, at 0347:16, something changes. A radar technician aboard USS Lake Erie, a Ticonderoga-class cruiser positioned as the strike group's forward air defense picket, sees a signature appear on his console. The contact is 73 nautical miles away, climbing vertically at 4,000 meters per second. He has exactly 127 seconds to decide if this is a drill, a malfunction, or the opening move of a war the Pentagon spent $850 billion trying to prevent. But here's what you need to understand about those 127 seconds. They weren't about technology. They were about physics, geometry, and a tactical reality that defense contractors don't advertise in congressional budget office hearings. Because when Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps launched that Al-Qadr ballistic missile from a concealed coastal battery near Bandar Abbas, they weren't trying to sink a $13 billion aircraft carrier. They were testing something far more dangerous. What came next revealed a vulnerability that's kept Pentagon strategists awake ever since. Deceased, let's talk about the Aegis combat system. Because understanding why it couldn't stop what happened next requires understanding what it was actually designed to do. Aegis is an integrated naval weapons system developed by Lockheed Martin and the U.S. Navy over 4 decades. It combines the AN/SPY one-phased array radar, Aegis ballistic missile defense software, and a vertical launch system capable of firing SM-3 and SM-6 interceptor missiles. In controlled testing conditions, Aegis has successfully intercepted ballistic missiles in mid-course phase. The system can track over 100 targets simultaneously and coordinate defensive fires across multiple ships in a carrier strike group. That's the sales pitch. Here's the tactical reality. At 0347:16, when that Al-Qadr missile broke the horizon, it was already traveling at Mach 6. It's by the time Aegis calculated a firing solution, assigned interceptors, and initiated launch sequences, the missile had climbed to an apogee of 120 kilometers, well into the ballistic phase where physics, not guidance systems, determines trajectory. The USS Lake Erie launched 2 SM-3 Block 2A interceptors at 0347:58, 42 seconds after initial detection. Both interceptors performed exactly as designed. Their kinetic warheads separated cleanly. Guidance systems tracked the target through terminal phase, but the Al-Qadr wasn't following a standard ballistic trajectory. Because Iran's military didn't build this missile to maximize range or payload, they built it to exploit a specific geometric vulnerability that exists when you try to defend an aircraft carrier in the confined waters of the Strait of Hormuz. The interceptors closed at a combined speed of 15,000 miles per hour. What happened in the next 38 seconds changed every calculation about naval superiority. March 12th, 2026, 0348:29 hours, 91 seconds since launch detection. The USS Abraham Lincoln is 104,000 tons of displacement, equipped with 4 General Electric A-1B nuclear reactors generating 680 megawatts. Its air wing includes 64 aircraft, F/A, 18E/F, Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers, E-2D Hawkeyes, MH-60 helicopters. Construction cost, $13 billion. Annual operational cost, $700 million. Crew, 5,000 personnel. Right now, none of that matters, because the Al-Qadr missile is in terminal phase. Now descending at Mach 8 toward a target point, the Aegis system calculated 34 seconds ago, when the carrier was in a slightly different position. Here's the problem with defending against ballistic missiles at sea. Your ship is moving. The missile is moving. and the intercept calculation depends on predicting where both will be in three-dimensional space at the exact microsecond when kinetic warhead meets re-entry vehicle. In the open ocean, Aegis has room for error. If the first intercept fails, you launch again. You maneuver. You have depth of defense. In the Strait of Hormuz, you have 33 kilometers of width between Iranian territorial waters and Omani territorial waters. You have tanker traffic. You have international shipping lane. You have a geographic choke point where 20% of the world's oil supply passes through waters you can't freely maneuver in without triggering a diplomatic incident. The SM-3 interceptors reached intercept coordinates at 034834. Close-in weapon systems aboard 3 destroyers activated automatically. Phalanx CIWS rotating at 4,500 rounds per minute, tracking the descending target. The E-2D Hawkeye overhead vectored 2 FA-18 Super Hornets toward the threat axis, even though everyone knew they couldn't possibly reach firing position in time. And aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, damage control teams activated pre-stage protocols for ballistic missile impact, sealing watertight doors, evacuating non-essential personnel from the flight deck, preparing medical teams for mass casualty response. That's because by 034841, every tactical system in the carrier strike group had calculated the same probability. Intercept failure was likely, but the missile wasn't targeting what everyone assumed. This is where the tactical deception becomes clear. At 034847, the Al-Qadr re-entry vehicle executed a terminal maneuver, a slight course correction using small thruster vents, not enough to change its ballistic arc significantly, just enough to shift impact coordinates by 900 meters. It didn't hit the USS Abraham Lincoln. It hit the water 700 meters off the carrier's port bow. The explosion? Conventional warhead, approximately 500 kilograms, detonated on surface impact. No penetration of the carrier's hull, no casualties, no damage beyond shattered windows in the island superstructure from overpressure. U.S. Central Command issued a statement within 90 minutes. Iranian missile launch detected and tracked. No damage to U.S. assets. Strike group continues operations. Media coverage lasted 48 hours before the news cycle moved on. But here's what Pentagon analysts understood immediately, and what Iran wanted them to understand. This wasn't a failed attack. This was a message written in ballistic mathematics. Because that 700-meter miss, that was deliberate. That terminal maneuver proved Iran could adjust impact coordinates in terminal phase, which means they could have hit the carrier if they wanted to. They chose not to. Instead, they demonstrated 3 capabilities that fundamentally alter the strategic calculus of U.S. Naval Forces Central Command operating in the Persian Gulf. At first, they can detect and target a moving carrier strike group using over-the-horizon radar and satellite cueing, despite U.S. electronic warfare measures. Second, they can launch ballistic missiles on depressed trajectories that reduce Aegis intercept windows to under 90 seconds. Third, they can achieve accuracy sufficient to strike specific aim points on a moving naval target, or deliberately miss to send a political signal. And there's a fourth capability they demonstrated, one that's even more dangerous. They can do all of this while maintaining plausible deniability about whether it was a failed attack or a calibrated warning shot. Which means the next time it happens, U.S. commanders have to assume it's a genuine attack and respond accordingly. That's the hidden kill, not the missile that missed. The strategic ambiguity that makes every subsequent launch potentially catastrophic. The Pentagon's response took exactly 72 hours. What they decided changed U.S. military posture in the Middle East. March 15, 2026, 72 hours after the Strait of Hormuz incident. The U.S. Department of Defense announces Operation Epic Fury, a coordinated campaign involving 3 aircraft carrier strike groups, strategic bomber deployments from Diego Garcia, and Tomahawk missile strikes against Iranian military targets. Defense Secretary briefings emphasize proportional response and re-establishing deterrence. But the actual Pentagon assessment, based on classified tactical intelligence, is calculating something different. Because here's what the defense planners understand. Iran didn't fire one missile to test U.S. defenses. Instead, they fired one missile to change the rules. Prior to March 12th, U.S. carrier strike groups operated with the assumption that Iranian anti-ship capabilities, primarily subsonic cruise missiles and small boat swarms, could be managed through layered defenses and superior situational awareness. Post-March 12th, that assumption is obsolete. The Al-Qadr strike demonstrated that Iran can threaten aircraft carriers without using the weapon systems U.S. defenses were optimized to counter. Ballistic missiles launched from concealed coastal batteries, following depressed trajectories, create intercept geometry that Aegis struggles with, especially in confined waters, and the strategic problem compound. If you're defending a carrier strike group in the Strait of Hormuz, you can't just intercept the missile. Then you need to intercept it over water you control. Because if an intercept happens over Iranian territorial waters and debris falls on Iranian soil, you've just given Tehran justification for escalation. The Pentagon's 72-hour response wasn't about retaliation. It was about re-establishing the perception of invulnerability that carrier strike groups depend on for power projection. Because the moment adversaries believe they can credibly threaten a U.S. aircraft carrier, the strategic value of that carrier, as a symbol, as a deterrent, as a floating airbase, begins to erode. And at $700 million per year in operational costs, plus the $13 billion construction investment, the Department of Defense needs that symbol to remain untouchable. But the true cost of what happened goes far beyond budget spreadsheets. Let's talk about what this actually cost. The U.S. Navy operates 11 aircraft carrier strike groups. Each one requires approximately 7,500 personnel, 60-plus aircraft, and an escort force of cruisers and destroyers equipped with Aegis. Annual operational cost per strike group, approximately $1 billion when you account for fuel, maintenance, personnel, air wing operations, and deployed support. That's $11 billion per year just to maintain carrier-based power projection capability. Now, add the cost of the systems designed to defend those carriers, Aegis upgrades, SM-3 and SM-6, interceptor procurement, E-2, D-Hawkeye early warning aircraft, electronic warfare suites. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the U.S. military budget for fiscal year 2025 at $850 billion. Naval operations account for approximately $190 billion of that total. And all of that spending, every defense contractor negotiation, every procurement hearing, every budget appropriation, rests on a fundamental assumption that U.S. aircraft carriers can operate with impunity in international waters, protected by technological superiority that adversaries cannot overcome. March 12, 2026 didn't disprove that assumption, but it tested it in ways that Pentagon strategists are still calculating. Because the next time a U.S. carrier strike group operates near the Strait of Hormuz, commanders will have to account for ballistic missile threats in addition to all existing threat vectors. That changes defensive posture. That changes rules of engagement. That changes the operational calculus of when and where to deploy carrier-based power projection. And Iran knows this, which is why they didn't need to sink the USS Abraham Lincoln. They just needed to prove they could hit it if they chose to. That's strategic ambiguity as a weapon, and it costs nothing compared to building aircraft carriers. March 14, 2026, current day. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group remains on station in the Arabian Sea, outside the Strait of Hormuz. 2 additional carrier strike groups have deployed to the region. U.S. Central Command maintains elevated alert status. Iran continues military exercises near the Strait of Hormuz, periodically releasing footage of missile tests and naval drills. Shipping traffic through the strait has decreased by 18%. Insurance premiums for tankers transiting the area have tripled. Global oil prices remain volatile. And in classified briefing rooms at the Pentagon, military planners are recalculating what it means to defend a $13 billion aircraft carrier in an age when adversaries can credibly threaten it using weapons that cost less than the interceptors designed to stop them. This is the new tactical reality. Naval superiority isn't just about having the most advanced ships. It's about maintaining the perception that those ships are invulnerable. The moment that perception cracks, the entire strategic framework begins to shift. 127 seconds, 1 ballistic missile, 700 meters of deliberate miss. That's all it took to change the calculus of naval warfare in the Persian Gulf. The question now is whether the U.S. Navy can adapt faster than adversaries can exploit the vulnerabilities exposed on March 12, 2026, because the next missile might not miss by 700 meters. If you found this analysis valuable, subscribe for weekly breakdowns of military strategy, defense technology, and the tactical realities behind naval warfare. Hit the notification bell. We analyze the operations you won't see covered anywhere else. Drop a comment. Do you think aircraft carriers are still relevant in modern naval warfare? Or are they becoming obsolete in the age of long-range precision missiles? Next week, we're breaking down the USS Gerald R., Ford's electromagnetic launch system, and whether 3 carrier strike groups in the Middle East leaves the U.S. Navy spread too thin in the Pacific. You won't want to miss it. Until then, stay tactical.